Pokopia, a land destroyed and abandoned by humanity. As the name suggests in its meaning, it is a place that will be rebuilt little by Pokemon into a utopia. But currently, it is left completely destitute, with a singular Ditto being released from its prison, now entering the world as it mimics its long-lost trainer. But what actually happened to the humans that once resided here, with a destroyed Pokemon Center being the first sign that something horrifying may have happened? Our only clues so far are a sickly Pikachu, a Tangrowth so intelligent it's taken on the title of Professor, and a Snorlax that has chosen to slumber for so long that moss has grown upon its body, choosing to sleep in a world that can't sustain its hunger. But there's far more to all of this, as this is a story we have seen time and time again within the world of Pokemon. A story of humanity's failures, of our failures. Howdy there, I'm Curlick, and we'll be digging into every single time that people within the world of Pokemon have nearly destroyed or have succeeded in destroying their own world, which would then result in a world much like what we see in Pokopia, a timeline in which we've completely ignored their warnings and destroyed everything, leaving it a desolate landscape. Though before we can even dig into all of those stories and how Pokopia is another cautionary tale, we need to actually understand Pokopia in its entirety. Or at least as far as we know it from the one trailer we have, which is a pretty long trailer, I have to admit. Now, as stated in my intro, Pokopia is a land without humans. In the beginning, we are shown it is a dry and desolate landscape with a broken down Pokemon Center, though just outside of it still sits a currently working PC. The first Pokemon we get to see, more than just an overpass of, is Professor Tangrowth, fit with a pair of broken glasses where a bow would go, a TM disc attached to one of its vines, and the top of its body being bleached completely white. This is already incredibly strange, as Tangela and Tangrowth aren't technically the vines that we see, but some sort of creature beneath it all. And if you want to take the beta sprite of their baby form into account, then it is just a little one-eyed creature that grows vines from its body like hair. Plants turning white could also be because of a number of different issues, but it can also be narrowed down to three main causes: fungal infections, insect infections, or nutrient deficiencies. Looking close at plants and their soil would help determine what that cause is, but it's fair to say that at least in this case, especially since we can't really do the analysis in person because we can't just teleport inside a video game, is that this is nutrient deficiency. That is what's causing our issue with Professor Tangrowth. After all, the lands are pretty barren with plants hardly surviving, and if this occurs for a long enough time, then the flow of nutrients will just leach away. These nutrients are created from any animals and plants growing and dying within any given area and are fairly or relatively distributed, moved around and used up by the new generation. But if there's no new generation and there's no way to keep these nutrients, then the issues will only worsen, meaning that there can't be another generation. In fact, because plants are dying, this means that there are no roots in the ground to hold the dirt in place. Eventually, this would lead to great amounts of erosion from the wind, destroying the soil even further and making it harder for plants to grow here without strong, deep roots. The trailer actually seems to insinuate that Tangrowth is alive and waiting for an incredibly long time. Frustrated, lonely, but still trying to survive and help the lands flourish, trying to make them become better. But this is no easy feat. Eventually, in the caves below, we see a Pokeball magically appear. I assume this is because the PC released it. And down here, we see a couple of different things: a book, a Leppa berry, another general waste that is very blurry. I'm unable to make it out, but if you're able to make out any finer details, please do let me know in the comments. Now, Ditto does break out, and we see a broken and barely functioning Kanto Pokédex, now establishing that we are either in Kanto, or at least a trainer is from Kanto. Pictured is Ditto and its trainer, whom it transforms into a child version of, I assume, instead of like the full human form. It bounces around, leaves the underground, and meets Tangrowth. They begin talking, and the narrator interprets their movements for us into language, thus giving us the name Professor Tangrowth as it waves around its talking stick. It admits that it has been quite some time since it last saw a human or another Pokemon, and how this place was once a home to many humans. All those that lived here are now gone, and Professor Tangrowth asks for our help in restoring this land so it can overflow with Pokemon once more, just like the old days. And I'll admit, I get a little extra excited when it openly states that you'll be creating habitats to attract Pokemon here. Each one, of course, being attracted to specific habitats with their preferences. But, of course, that's overgeneralized because all you have to do is create a fishing spot and Magikarp apparently start appearing. Which is admittedly hilarious to imagine that Magikarp are only in the water because they want to be caught or eaten, which doesn't really make any sense at all, but it is what it is. You can't have entire terrariums for every single Pokemon, or aquariums for that matter. You gotta keep something consistent, or even maybe those fishing spots are being put there to mimic the routes within Kanto, to rebuild the habitats that Kanto had to attract Pokemon back to their original routes that we saw them on. What's most fascinating to me is that the Pokemon that do appear here as a whole are not consistent with any region if we wanted to claim it was a different region. There is always one outlier. But something they reinforce is that this has to be the Kanto region, indirectly stating so, with Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle showing up in the wild. The only other time that this has happened so far is within an island scan of Alola, or within Legends ZA completely naturally, which was also thanks to actually the Mega Energy being built up in Lumio City, so maybe it wasn't necessarily natural 100%. Now, I think so far with the evidence that we do have, we just take the simplest answer as the correct answer, meaning that this is the Kanto region and Pokemon have migrated here. This isn't the first time that this has happened, as pretty much with every single remake of a Pokemon game, we get an updated list of Pokemon within a route, now including Pokemon from new generations, such as seeing a Cottony float in from Unova after the events of Kyogre and Groudon within Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. Moving on though with the trailer, Ditto is able to learn moves from other Pokemon that it meets, taking in their abilities and using them in a multitude of different ways that are beneficial towards tending to the land, water, and overall environment, even allowing travel through surfing and flying. Professor Tangrowth does make a joke after being watered that it hasn't withered away just yet, and that it didn't need to have the water vomited onto it by Ditto effectively, and this helps support that dehydration is not Tangrowth's problem, but rather that nutrition issue as I had stated. Small note, Tangrowth do eat fruits, but they do also hunt other Pokemon as per their Pokédex information. But you can craft stuff in the game, showing how intelligent a Ditto honestly is, making our Ditto the Pokemon equivalent of Nikola Tesla, I suppose, or rather, correction, Thomas Edison. A lot of the old stuff gets a little screwy when it comes to electricity, and I just struggle to remember who did what sometimes. Now, we can also nix the idea that these Pokemon are humans that have been transformed a la Mystery Dungeon style, as Tangrowth doesn't even know how to use building blocks. It's okay, Tangrowth. I learned how to tie my shoes at a much older age than other kids. Each Pokemon are shown to have requests with certain preferences and desires that should be met in order to make them happy, with the first main quest being for us to rebuild the Pokemon Center, allowing the first step towards reuniting people and Pokemon to be complete, something that Professor Tangrowth wishes to see once more. The trailer emphasizes working together with Pokemon as a community would to hit advancements in your civilization and build large structures together. Even Pikachu gets its own fountain as a surfing Pikachu, but with a Ditto face, which I'd say is an upgrade. Pictures are taken, you can change your look and clothing, decorate your room, and even within that room, there's all sorts of technology. One piece of whatever that is, looking like it was designed after a Porygon, which I assume will appear in the game and might be able to tell us what may have happened here in finer detail. A little unlocking moments. And as if Kanto wasn't confirmed, when the Ditto dresses up to look similar to Misty, with at least the hairstyle being the same as hers, maybe not the hair color, Professor Tangrowth makes the kinda sad pun of, why does seeing you like this make my eyes a bit misty? Really putting the final nail in the coffin for this taking place somewhere in Kanto, if not a large chunk of the Kanto region. If I was forced to make a decision onto where this could be taking place, I want to say, based on like the angles that they've used, that we might be looking at Fuchsia City. I could be completely wrong, but Fuchsia would be very interesting to see based on these angles, in addition to maybe even seeing that it might take place in Celadon, a place where it has had Grimer within the little pools of water inside of their own town. Then at the end of the trailer, we get some final reveals. The first is a very well painted Smeargle that is absolutely out of the norm. Not in that it's covered in paint, but that it has a paint mustache, which I think is really nice. And more importantly, that its tail is 3 different colors. A Smeargle secretes 1 color from its tail traditionally within the games. Though even in the anime, the Smeargle, while they only have 1 color on their tail at a time, they're able to change it depending on mood or, I suppose, diets. It's not 100% confirmed. Now, this Smeargle is specifically named Smearguru, described as a prolific painter. It's not really said in the games, but if you look at the Pokemon website, you're able to find this information. Now, the lights flicker around it and spark out, leaving it in the dark. As the lights return, we see a lone Pikachu, ghostly in visage and named Pikachu. The knee-jerk reaction of every single person with the flickering lights and the ghostly visage it has is to make the claim that it is a ghost type, when in fact, it is just a sick Pikachu. Peaky, by definition, is how you would describe someone who looks sickly, and with it looking so pale and hardly even able to produce electricity, it definitely looks sick. It seems fine and happy until it tries to produce said electricity and fails. Then it gives you those big ol' sad doe eyes that just honestly break my heart a little bit. She is noted to be pale with a smaller than average tail. Now, this is really strange considering Pikachu usually use their tails a lot. The tails of Pikachu are typically used to greet one another by rubbing them against each other. They raise their tail to check their surroundings and will occasionally be struck by lightning, which only serves to restore their energy. And if they aren't, then they will recharge themselves by sleeping overnight. Pikachu here likely believes that if it sleeps, it should be able to restore its electrical charge, explaining why it's so sad when it wakes up and is still unable to release electricity efficiently. What I wonder then is if Pikachu was actually caused by random mutation, resulting in this smaller tail, but that still doesn't necessarily explain why the rest of its abilities are dampened or why it is actually sad about them. Because if it lived with it all its life, then it shouldn't be sad about this particular ability. Then again, I have asthma, and I get sad about that sometimes, so I guess, do that what you will. But it also wouldn't make sense for its tail to just shrink randomly due to the random effects of the world or what's going on. So there must be a mixture of how Pikachu was born and how the world around it became worse, that we then have this creature being put into a disadvantage such as this. But our last reveal is of a Snorlax completely covered in moss, the soft light of a lamppost or even moonlight, allowing the flower on its head to bloom. Something that you would expect of many flowers that have to bloom at night where the sun is not as harsh. This could just be the type of flower that it is, or it could be that even the air itself has lowered in quality. Thus, the sun had become harsher and forced plants to adapt. Almost like global warming may have some level of effect in this, and the atmosphere has been ruined in some way. Good ol' ozone talk. Rayquaza is probably majorly upset. And yes, for anyone that has argued in the past that global warming doesn't exist in Pokemon, I give you Galar as its own entire example. Literally, it focuses on global warming and the effects that humanity and Pokemon has had. A place that had an entire climate shift in addition to humanity putting so much pollution in the air that even wheezing had to gain a new form in order to balance things out by purifying the air there. Back to Pokopia though, this Snorlax is absolutely covered in moss, giving it the name Mosslax, which is adorable, marketable, they can make a chia pet of it, fuzzy blankets, you name it. Again, super duper marketable, and people are going to be buying it left, right, and center. I am people. Before we continue, let's thank the sponsor of this video, Mantis Sleep. They provided me with this little sleep mask, of which there are many other kinds, from cooling to heating to this sound mask that I have in my hands. These masks are made with the intention to block out light and help provide you with the greatest rest when you need it most. With these little cups that put no pressure on my eyes, did not mess with my naturally long eyelashes, and were very comfortable for my very sensitive skin. So I was already falling in love when I first put it on my face. But to make this mask even better is that on the sides it has these Bluetooth speakers that allow me to listen to rain or music without disturbing my partner at all. I also can't see right now, and if I bring the light any closer, it means nothing whatsoever, and you can see how bright this is, and I can just stare directly at it. I do not recommend staring at the sun while wearing this for your own protection. Neither does Manta Sleep, but I feel like I could block out the sun with this mask. Though you don't have to stop there, as you can listen to podcasts, music, whatever you really want while taking a nap in the middle of the day, not just sleeping at night. I know many of you listen to my videos while relaxing or going to sleep, so you could be listening to my voice while using this mask. I really do mean it though when I say I do love this mask, because on a more personal note, not only do I have minor sunlight sensitivity, but also I have tinnitus. And when I got sick and they sent me this mask, it was perfect timing because my tinnitus was blocking up like half of my hearing at night especially, but with the help of this mask, I could resolve that issue without having to jam uncomfortable earbuds into my ear. I was able to get such a good night's rest that I actually overslept by about 2 hours on my workday. And I will say now is the best time to get in on this because with code KRILLIC, you will get 10% off on your order. There are plenty of other options available with customization for the eye cups. And if you like white noise, but you don't want it projected into your ears via the mask, they do have a white noise machine with plenty of options available to it for heavy rain, light rain, you name it. So get in on this offer. Follow the link in the description and pinned comments and get 10% off using code KRILLIC and get that beauty sleep that you deserve. One more time, thank you to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video, and on with the video. You and I both know that Snorlax is a Pokemon that eats a buffet for its appetizer and then continues to eat its way through entire silos full of grain. It is actually noted to require roughly 900 pounds or 400 kilograms of food every single day. Yet, this one has been asleep long enough for moss to grow on it, for Professor Tangrowth to have not seen it recently whatsoever, all while it still somehow retains this big ol' rotund form that it has. Now, Snorlax has always had two grandiose abilities, one being how it can eat anything without any complications to its stomach, including muck. The other ability is the ability to sleep without waking no matter what, assuming some child doesn't run up to its ear and just start playing the flute. Alternatively, within the Pokemon Adventures manga, it is awoken by Red, who tempts it with a honey-covered Bulbasaur and has to bike at Mach speed in order to avoid getting eaten. And the manga really does emphasize just how massive Snorlax really is. No matter what you look at, though, you would expect Snorlax to eat a mountain, and yet all it is doing is sleeping. This is more than likely the only response it had to an environment in which food became incredibly scarce. A Pokemon that effectively eats in massive amounts as a form of population control was no longer necessary, and it proceeded to hibernate similar to the bear that it looks like. Which it kinda is a bear, to be entirely fair. A bear named after Kirby, after it is actually called Kabigon. So with all of this broken down though, I can very much tell you that this is yet another tale that can be added to our list of stories in which people within the Pokemon world have caused the destruction of nature or the ecosystem as a whole. For this is not the first time we have been told this story. In fact, this is more like the 5th or 6th time that Pokemon is warning us about the future, about us mistreating the world we live in, and how eventually, even after humanity passes, nature will retake the Earth. And I want to actually begin this with Pokemon Legends Arceus. The overarching story of Legends Arceus is one that I feel enough people don't talk about. Yeah, we get Volo, who is one of the greatest villains of Pokemon. Yeah, we get Spooky Alpha Pokemon, ready to run us over and eat us. Yeah, we get Giratina, jump-starting the biblical apocalypse. But it all begins with a disconnect between people and nature. The Celestica people who arrived in Hisui were more connected with nature. These people came from Sinjo specifically, Hisui being a place that reminds them of their home thanks to how cold and harsh these lands are, and so they would settle here for many a generation. We never get to truly see how strongly connected these people were to others, as they're all long gone, or at least we believe they are. The only exceptions to our understanding to this are Kogita and Volo, both of which have been all but directly confirmed to become immortal at some point in their lives, even if momentarily. And I know that sounds strange, but there's an interesting emphasis made on Kogita specifically, that if she truly was the one to write the old verses, as we might believe, that she would continue to be immortal until her mission was complete, which was to meet and assist Rei or Akari, the individual that would save Hisui from a great threat soon to come. This is because while the Celestica people were one with nature, the Diamond and Pearl clan who would arrive many years later were not. They brought war and strife against each other. They stole the values of the Celestica people and would recognize Dialga and Palkia as their own great god, their own great Sinnoh. Though nothing ever happens immediately. People are not just driven out or disappear within a day. Instead, there was the great hero of Hisui who bore the noble Pokemon granted by Arceus to keep balance between man and Pokemon so they may live in harmony together. Interesting point is that the great hero may have actually been 3 people, as evidenced by the portraits within ZA's museum, with ancestors of Archie and Maxie bearing Pokeballs of their own, the 3 totaling out to 10 Pokeballs altogether, but more on that in a special video coming out next week. Instead, let's focus back on the connection of man, Pokemon, and nature overall, because eventually the hero would pass away. The noble Pokemon would too, but their noble status would be passed on to future Pokemon. Meanwhile, as the glue that held the Diamond and Pearl clans together dissolved, the noble Pokemon would be split amongst them. They would argue to the point of being on the verge of starting a war with one another. Even though I said they brought war and conflict, they never actually had a war or full-on battles with each other for the land, for the nobles that we are aware of. But even then, eventually the noble Pokemon and the care of them would be split evenly between the 2 clans. This was the first disconnect between them and nature. They focused on these Pokemon and who would own them, not how they could serve alongside one another to protect nature and the lands of Hisui. They segregated themselves from each other. They divided up the land and are barely held together by the Galaxy Expedition Team's commander, Kamado. But even with these points of leadership between Kamado, Irida, and Adaman, there are a number of people who do not respect Pokemon, or at least are afraid of them. A strong disconnect growing stronger over time, more intense, as people even begin to make up rumors about Pokemon. They misunderstand the creatures, seeing them all as threats, as strange will-o-wisps in the trees, and of course, the greatest piece of disconnect, the killing of the Zora population. We know in the present day that Zora are mischievous little foxes, but are ultimately harmless at the end of the day. They're inspired by one of many different kinds of kitsune that exist, or, well, exist in myth. Creatures that can shapeshift and use magic for a number of nefarious purposes. The most legendary of them being Tamama no Mai, a kitsune who pretended to be a human from childhood all the way through adulthood, was betrothed to the emperor and even murdered him as she sent the entire country into complete turmoil. And while these are supposed to just be stories in our world, the legends of the kitsune are much more believable, considering Zora are genuine living creatures that are capable of disguising themselves as humans and other Pokemon and performing tricks, magical abilities, and bringing that threat, that imaginary threat, to life. Thus driving the fear of Pokemon even higher, because if this one can replace us, then what can the rest of these things do? Which is an understandable reaction, but that doesn't mean it's the right reaction. This then becomes a fight between hysteria, ignorance, and the actual truth. It devolves and enters a tailspin of chaos that eventually results in not only the genocide of Zora within Hisui, but also the moment in which Pokemon turn their backs on humanity. And this hatred and fear then spawns the Hisuian variant, a Pokemon that is a revenant, a creature that represents all the malice of mankind. Even within Hisui Snow Episode 1, we see a lot of this happen, but there's one line that sticks out the most. People and Pokemon can never coexist.
People and Pokemon can never coexist.
Zora is the pinnacle of mankind's disconnect with nature, but there's still hope. Because even with this pain and betrayal, the right human can befriend Hisui and Zora and Zoroark, showing that that connection can be restored. This restoration is what saves the lands of Hisui through the work of our character and through Ingo. For as you play the game, you can work through many different side quests that will help teach people about Pokemon. You unite them with new bonds, you ease their fears, and you help someone use a Geodude as a jar lid to help with the pickling process. I can't say anything is wrong with that because apparently the Geodude is just chill with it. This actually is the same exact thing that is happening within the Legends ZA game within Lumiose. And as a side note, this might be my biggest gripe that people complain about regarding the game. Yes, hold up your standards, apply constructive criticism, but those that can't bother to play the side quests for all of the extra stories and details shouldn't complain about things that are missing from the main story, because the side missions aren't relevant to the main story, they are supplementary, meaning they are optional, they are side quests, but they help you learn the game mechanics, help you connect with the city with its people and Pokemon, and that is something that is heavily pushed throughout the game. But I'll step off of my soapbox and get back onto the track of Hisui, because as stated, we aren't the only ones trying to work their way through this land and restore the connection between people and Pokemon. We aren't the only ones trying to strengthen it. Ingo was brought all the way from Unova, slammed dunked into the snowlands of Hisui, can't remember anything about his past, and is quickly made a warden within the Pearl clan, and partnered to the special Sneasler that helps us climb large cliff sides. Wonder if we're like rattling around and just hitting our head constantly, or it's like, you know, the Nezuko box, where it's nice and comfortable and we have nothing to worry about. His skills with Pokemon alongside his comfort with them is what drives this into existence. Ingo is, of course, one of the Battle Subway Masters alongside his brother Emmett, but nobody in Hisui knows this. Instead, as he fulfills his purpose without knowing that he's doing so, he slowly regains memories of his actual home. He connects us with the Sneasler, assists us with the melee situation, and eventually starts to maintain the training grounds within Jubilife and imposing challenges on those who would like to take them. Not just connecting people and Pokemon, but improving their bonds more and more. All until he states one day that it's time for him to go, and he disappears once more, catapulted back to the present time as he regains his position next to his brother, and they run the battle subway once more, people within Lumiose eager to challenge them. It was always questioned why Ingo was there in Hisui and if Arceus had actually sent him, and I believe this strongly shows that the answer is simply yes, that it wasn't a mistake, that he didn't just get launched through an ultra wormhole or something along those lines, and it is through the efforts of both ourselves and Ingo that the worst of the worst was avoided. Which would lead me to talk about Volo, but I actually don't want to talk about Volo here in excess because his part is actually more religious than anything. Yes, his actions would have caused great chaos and mayhem despite him claiming that he would make the world better, but he had true bonds with his Pokemon. What's more important is to actually recognize that his actions incited fear amongst people. Through pairing with Giratina, the noble Pokemon were struck with intense amounts of energy through the powerful godlike lightning. This causes the noble Pokemon to rampage, making even the most devout of worshippers amongst the Diamond and Pearl clans fear them. And if they could never solve this bond breaking that had happened due to these sparks of lightning, then this would be the final severance of the connection between man and nature, a severance that would likely result in a war against Pokemon. But this war is not one that could be won, because mankind could never truly stand a candlestick's chance of a flame against the great roaring power that Pokemon do have. And because I know there's someone that will say, just nuke them, there's two reasons why, humans lose at the end of the day. One is because if you do manage to kill Yveltal, it is death itself and will just rise again from whatever new life you've created. It will just absorb whatever lives after the fallout and will take their lives next. The second reason is because Pokemon like Grimer, Trubbish, and any other Pokemon composed of the constructs of mankind and are filth. It doesn't matter what we do, Pokemon are effectively avatars of nature, and they will always come back into existence in new forms, adapting to it, much like how Professor Juniper claims. Whatever forms are necessary to survive and clean the world in which we live in. And so I present to you the old verses you've heard from me probably a billion times if you're not new to the channel. The old verses that will guide us through the next sections of the story where mankind did not heed the tales of horror. The tales in which we destroy nature, and even in its rot, Pokemon managed to return and then they restored the lands to full health. Just the same as what we will be doing within Pokopia. Once it shone upon us all with the warmth of welcome sun, but now we weep, to grief we fall, starved of light now it has gone. And some they go, despair withal, in search of it they reel and run. They quit their hurts, abandon all, and leave our lands to be undone. And when they're gone beyond recall, this land will be a home to none. This land will only ever be a home to Pokemon. This is the true story of Hisui, a land once revered and loved until it's disrespected and destroyed. The light of Arceus, of nature, no longer here with us as we continue to destroy nature. And as it continues to be destroyed, we leave, running and searching for something new, for greener pastures that we did not create with our own hands. We abandon our homes, we leave the lands to burn in the flames of destruction that we personally created. And when humanity is gone, far gone away from here and potentially even extinct, the land will only ever be a home to Pokemon. And before we continue, I just want to say, thank you for watching. If you're new, I release weekly deep dives, so make sure you subscribe for more. In addition, leave a comment about your theories regarding Pokopia. Maybe there's something I missed. I will say there was a leak regarding Pokopia's map, and while it was shown to me, I don't want to show you guys or tell you it, because I'm not a big fan of sharing leaks on my channel if it's something that's to come in the future still. I feel like that's very unfair, and, you know, that'll land me in hot water that I don't want to be in. I will say though, commenting and watch time are the best way to boost a video, and I recommend even sharing the channel with friends who need something to listen to. And if you'd like to go the extra mile, become a member of the channel for as little as $3 a month to get extra perks like early videos and hearing your name in the credits. And one last note, I will say please join the Patreon for free at the very least. We have 53 total members there, and if we hit 100 between the paid and free members, I will begin free monthly newsletters. It also helps because then you can make sure you never miss a new video when it's released, as I will let you know in an announcement there and in the Discord server. With that then, I digress. Thank you once more, and on with the video. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. I'm sure I just heard somebody scream in happiness from me mentioning Mystery Dungeon. It is something I've wanted to talk about so much more, but just haven't been quite prepared to dive into it. There's so much to talk about it, but the most I've had the chance with was back when I completed that massive iceberg from long ago. Now, with Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, or PMD as I'm going to call it from here on in to save my breath, there's a lot of strange happenings or Pokemon that theoretically should not exist at all, considering it's supposed to be a world without humans, or a world in which humans never existed, or a world where humans went extinct, or it's a random island in the middle of nowhere where humans aren't known to exist, whatever. I'm not the first to say any of this, not by a long shot. Though it's such an incredibly long-standing theory, and it's one that holds an incredible amount of merit behind it. We can look at many of the structures within the world and assume that Pokemon may have made them, which is fine. After all, Conkeldurr was the one to teach mankind how to make concrete, so why can't it teach other Pokemon to do the same? And there are plenty of Pokemon that like to help build while also being intelligent creatures. We can even look at our psychic Pokemon such as Alakazam and Oranguru, who are Pokemon that have the capacity to not only learn and teach, but also train other Pokemon. Add Slowking to that list. They have the ability to impart wisdom onto other Pokemon and guide them into building a full society, all while Pokemon have their own universal language that is separate from our own, and they, again, it's universal, all understand each other. So we can whisk away the plausibility of mankind making most of the structures within PMD, but not all of them. There are places such as the Buried Relic, which house not only Mew, but also the legendary giants, as I will lead us into the theory that humanity did go extinct within the PMD world. All of these Pokemon have always had some sort of temple structure dedicated to them in some form in the games or the anime. For Mew, there's tons of depictions within artwork, but there is a temple within Pokemon Snap that it primarily resides in within a jungle. Then with the Regis, the lore regarding all 6 of them has always stood as these massive beings that were always revered and even feared by mankind. Legendary golems that had powers beyond our comprehension, creatures constructed purely of rock, metal, ice, electricity, and draconic energy. Beings given life by an even greater power that is Regigigas. Though here we only find the 3 original Regis, their connection with mankind is incredibly important, because they have been controlled by trainers before in all forms of Pokemon media. In the anime, before Regigigas took control back, in the games by ourselves or in the Battle Tower, and then in the manga as they served to help protect the world from devastation. And now, we must unite all people within our nation. I'm not saying the rest of it, but the Team Rocket motto is now playing on my head in repeat for the rest of this video. Trying to shake that worm out of my ears, these Regis grew to be feared, likely because mankind realized that they could never truly be controlled as long as Regigigas was awake. Being their creator, it could steal them away from any trainer who had the Regis, and so people likely learned this firsthand, built the temples, and then would work to seal away each of the Regis in separate locations out of fear. Each of these locations having an Absol on the route just outside of where the Regis are locked away, standing as a warning of what may come to those who would approach these legendary giants. Now, what's wild to me is that whether it be here or in other locations within PMD, we also get to see Porygon. It's in every single mystery dungeon, but the methods in which it's found are different. This can be through this buried relic in Mystery Dungeon Red, Wondermail if you're playing Mystery Dungeon Blue, the Deep Spatial Rift in Time, Darkness, and Sky, Wondermail in Stormy and Light, and finally within the buried and Dark Knight relic in Mystery Dungeon DX. In other words, the only way that Porygon is obtained is through ruins or through space-time rifts. Very similarly to how you could only obtain Porygon through the space-time rifts within Legends Arceus, but this doesn't explain why the Porygon are widespread, unlike their limited appearance within Hisui. In fact, the rifts within Hisui seem to just appear and then disappear, taking all the items and Pokemon with them, as long as they all stay within the rift's zone, of course. So it becomes a little bit complicated there. I would like to make it clear, though, that Porygon is actively choosing to make its habitat within the ruins in PMD, which is very important, because that might mean that it finds familiarity amongst these ruins, being a Pokemon created by mankind directly, just as these ruins are. Now, there are plenty of other Pokemon we could talk about, but I'm not going to waste the time doing so. I'll just list them off. Grimer, Magnemite, Boltoy, even Castform is here. Another Pokemon that literally would not exist were it not for the people of Hoenn sitting down and saying, I need a living water molecule to tell me the weather. But the greatest glaring terror of all, in terms of what the past of Mystery Dungeon was, is the existence of Mewtwo. And not only Mewtwo. No, it couldn't just be Mewtwo, but also Mega X and Mega Y Mewtwo. I specified that because I'm 99% sure we're gonna get Mega Mewtwo Z. I will find out before this video comes out, but not before it goes live for public viewers. Members of the channel, get it nice and early so they can confirm that I said this, or this was uploaded before then. Anywho, this is a legendary Pokemon created by humanity to be stronger than anything found in nature, and mega forms that would not exist were it not for the use of AZ's ultimate weapon, just blasting life energy into the world for it to be used by this Pokemon. Now, I am going to at least openly admit, I did not realize that its mega forms were found within PMD Rescue Team DX. And for the longest time, I've had in my back pocket that this exact Mewtwo was Rainbow Rocket Giovanni's Mewtwo. And now I see this, and I'm gonna have to make another massive theory video on Giovanni's reign, as if my theory on him killing Green wasn't already enough. Yes, you could go check out that video. I highly recommend it. It's really fun. Anywho, Mewtwo and its mega forms here, alongside the ruins of mankind and the many Pokemon created by humanity, tells us a story in a very indirect way. Within the Mystery Dungeon universe, people and Pokemon may have lived in harmony together as intended after the firing of the ultimate weapon, something that AZ advocated for after firing the ultimate weapon to end the war, and he became the first ever trainer as indicated by his trainer ID. History continues as expected. We can jump a couple thousand years, and eventually we just land within Kanto. And the interesting thing, or part about Kanto, is that it has one thing that directly ties it to what we see within Mystery Dungeon, the power plant that humanity abandoned. The spawns in both Mystery Dungeon and in the original games are almost one-to-one, with the Magnemite, Voltorb, and Alakid lines being present. The only one missing is Pikachu, with Zapdos not actually making this its home despite being found here within the mainline games. Instead, it's flying up on Thunder Mountain or whatever the heck it's called. I don't like that place. As a side note, I played Mystery Dungeon DX on the Switch. I was a Squirtle, my partner was a Bulbasaur, so you can imagine how the Zapdos fight went and how I never actually beat that game. Again, back to this abandoned power plant, even the visuals kind of line up to match each other decently well, not one-to-one, but that might also just be Pokemon's way of creating electrical plants in their style. Even if it isn't, it still brings about an interesting tie to when the Mystery Dungeon world could have split from the main timeline we are aware of. Onward with the story, we find that there is one consistent story within Kanto across all forms of media, and it's that Giovanni aimed to use Pokemon as tools for his own growth, for his own monetary gain, for his own power on his rise to the top. In the games, he's just a guy who runs the evil organization from the shadows, takes over Silphco, and is revealed to be the 8th gym leader. Nothing much. Not even revealed to be involved with the creation of Mewtwo, surprisingly. We don't get that until the anime or until we read the manga, which has a whole lot of other details and information that is added to it, making the Viridian Forest his training spot for his Pokemon army, making Sabrina, Surge, and Koga his admirals, and other stuff that really only exists within the manga. He's actually shown to be incredibly amazing as a Pokemon trainer, but nevertheless, it's there that we also get a very clear understanding of how Team Rocket created Mewtwo. No matter where we look, Mewtwo had to be created by humanity, but what happens afterwards is where we get more splits within timelines or universes, because Mewtwo may have still broken itself out as it does in every version that we have seen, becoming an unstoppable force except by the newly crowned champion. But what if that champion never arrived? What if that champion arrived and failed to defeat Giovanni, and we found ourselves in a new timeline? A timeline in which Giovanni would then serve to try and recapture his lost project that is Mewtwo. His failure or success would then bring us to one last split in the timeline, I theorize, and in his success, Mewtwo becomes his, Mega evolves, and we get Team Rainbow Rocket Giovanni. But for more on that, check out my video explaining who the dead follower of Alola is, going back to that green video. Instead, here, we will focus on the version of Giovanni failing to capture Mewtwo, who then sees this as the last nail in the coffin to show that humanity cannot be redeemed, resulting in the extermination of mankind, something that Mewtwo wasn't seeking to do, but would do in the event that it feels its life and the life of other Pokemon that it wanted to protect were threatened. It was unfortunately created as a living war machine after all. This would then explain the power plants and the ruins, how man-made Pokemon came into existence, and why we see Mega Mewtwo, but we don't see other man-made Pokemon such as Silvally, despite Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX coming out a whole 4 years after the Sun and Moon games. To be entirely fair, as a counterpoint though, there are 0 Alolan Pokemon in that game, so it might be a little bit unfair for me to state that just because Silvally isn't here, that it never existed, which may still lean back into the theory that Mystery Dungeon is isolated to islands and not the entirety of the world, especially as we do get some full maps within the Mystery Dungeon games. I just wanted to present that counter argument, just in case people wanted to believe otherwise, which is entirely understandable. Ultimately though, at the end, the result is the same, and the process on how we got here is the same as we've discussed. People ruin the land, mistreat the Pokemon become vengeful just like Hisui and Zora, and then instead of things becoming better, it becomes worse and humanity is removed from the world, leaving a world only for Pokemon. So, great, the Mystery Dungeon world failed, and I'm gonna let you know that it kind of gets a little worse from here as humanity really goofed things up in a couple of other areas and timelines. We have the Orre region within Pokemon Coliseum, a place that is Pokemon's version of Phoenix, Arizona. I heard that person in the back scream again. Enjoy. I'm happy that you're happy I'm finally talking about Coliseum. Now, prior to the events of Pokemon Coliseum, Orre was plagued by several crime syndicates. This is just basically Bulbapedia's synopsis to make things a little easier, such as Team Snag'em and Cypher. Both criminal organizations allied themselves as part of their plan to rule the world through Shadow Pokemon. Now, Shadow Pokemon are the pinnacle of mistreating nature and Pokemon as a whole. They are Pokemon whose hearts have been closed to kindness and love, their hatred and rage being the source of their power now as they are enveloped in shadow. The only way to purify them being through a special machine, Celebi's power, or just treating them with incredible kindness over the course of time. Incredible kindness with consistency. Once again, very similar to Hisui and Zora. Within Orre, hardly any Pokemon appear whatsoever in the wild. Actually, they're noted to be incredibly rare, save for a few specific spots found throughout the entire region. These would include Pyrite, where Shadow Pokemon were once distributed, and then the only natural areas being the Pokespots. One is a rocky area, one a lush oasis, and the last being a cave. And even once you go to these places, you have to lure Pokemon out into the open in order to have a chance to catch them. To make matters worse, a total of only 9 Pokemon can be found. Sandshrew, Gligar, and Trapinch within the rock area, effectively representing armadillos, scorpions, and antlions, even if Sandshrew is inspired by more than just an armadillo, arguably more pangolin and shrew mixed together when we have Sandslash in specific, though these 3 are hardy and can easily make home in these arid lands, so they might have migrated here or just simply continue to live here without an issue. In the Oasis, we have Hoppip, who is likely just floating their way through here from another region on the swift winds of the world. Phanpy, who is our Oasis elephant, nothing too crazy there, even though there's no Donphan. And then Surskit skidding across the waters and waiting until it evolves to likely leave this place. Actually, Donphan is most likely doing the same, turning into a tire and just going. And then finally, there's the cave, which we have Zubat, Aron, and Wooper. The first 2, I likely don't have to explain why they're there, but Wooper is only here because there's no other place where it can freely move around and stay happily moist. Stepping out into the heat of these Badlands will likely just cause it to shrivel up in a heartbeat, so within the caves it stays. These 9 Pokemon are all that's really left. Every single other Pokemon is obtained by taking them from the enemy or being gifted the Pokemon, with one special exception being if we don't consider the special event bonus disc Pokemon or E-card Pokemon, and this special exception is Ho-Oh. This legendary phoenix is beyond angry, arrives and uses its own sacred fire to stop the enemy faction once and for all when they tried to escape, and it is theorized that Ho-Oh arrives because of the mistreatment of the legendary beasts. And then of course, we get Shadow Lugia and the legendary birds in XD Gale of Darkness, so do with that information what you will. At the end of the day, it's very easy to connect the lack of wild Pokemon within this world through not only gameplay, but also lore, to the mass capture of Pokemon and turning them into these corrupted shadow forms. These people, these evil teams, have effectively destroyed the ecosystem. It's bad enough if you remove 1 or 2 Pokemon, but entire populations of nearly every single species has been removed. Nothing is left behind to care for the land. Nothing is here to rejuvenate, and hardly any other form of life is able to thrive. But life still manages to thrive. Life finds a way. I know I couldn't resist the quote. But with the constant creation of shadow Pokemon, it would effectively destroy the world, because Pokemon would be forced to stay under humanity's thumb against their will as a destructive force, which then explains why Celebi would step in, a spirit of nature itself and a Pokemon that is still worshipped within these lands with its own shrine. With the worst case scenario being that the antagonists would eventually capture Celebi, corrupt it, as we see in the movie, and have its power within their grasp. Of all the scenarios that are possible, that's easily one of the worst, assuming that none of the other Celebi do arrive to try and help fix this issue. All because Celebi has been shown in the anime to fix anomalies, and we could even theorize that its involvement with helping stop Giovanni could have been Celebi preventing the worst of the worst from happening again, which I theorized would be the creation of Team Rainbow Rocket. But that's a theory I've held for a long time, and I think we should move on to our next part. Alola is a place most connected with nature. They express this within the anime and show it within the games, with not only the general public being in tune with nature, but also the trial captains and the kahunas. When we look back at their roles in history, many of them hold values that connect them to Alola in tightly woven and very personal ways. This could be through Kiawe practicing and performing traditional Alolan dances, to Mallow sourcing ingredients from lush jungle for her family's restaurant, and so much more. As for the kahunas in specific, each of them have been chosen by the Tapus to become kahunas. And while you would expect this to be something that someone actively aims for or chooses to do, that's not actually the case necessarily. In fact, according to Acerola, a person chosen to be an island kahuna cannot refuse the position. In this case, she's actually referring to Nanu. A kahuna's reign lasts until they die, as was the case with Hapu's grandfather and predecessor, or until they are forcibly ejected from their position by their respective guardian deity, as was with the case with a former, unspecified, unnamed kahuna who established the gang that Team Skull drew inspiration from. Forced to hold these positions, the kahunas work alongside the Tapus, who are spirit guardians of nature. This is most evident not just by their titles as guardian deities or land spirits, but also through their signature moves, which are Nature's Madness and Guardian of Alola. Though despite this great power, they aren't just powered by the life within nature itself, they are also empowered by Necrozma's light. This all becomes the most evident when we look at the history of Alola and even the Ultra Ruins. Alola, as we know it, was once a very polluted place. It was covered in trash and filth, and it was a place that was largely uncared for. And while there are a couple of people who do say this, we have the most direct evidence shown through the relationship between Grimer and Trubbish lines. The Grimer we are most familiar with, noted as the Cantonian Grimer, was imported to the islands of Alola to help with cleanup efforts. Primarily, they were brought in to hunt the high population of Trubbish and Garbodor. Eventually, their consumption of chemical waste would cause the Grimer to reach a new form, the Alolan form, and any Garbodor that would survive here would be stronger through natural selection. As a side, to also better explain my claim on Alolan Grimer and Muck being of chemical makeup or transformation, their primary source of food is not waste from sewers, but rather waste in the form of furniture, garbage piles, anything made by the hands of humanity, theoretically chemical waste or synthetic waste. This difference is mimicked through what we see in Weezing and its Galarian form. Its original form can be found in these same areas as volcanoes or within the burnt mansion, places in which smoke would arise, carcinogenics. Meanwhile, the Galarian form would exist within the smoggy pollution that the people of Galar had created and destroyed their air quality with. Though, to be fair to them, they didn't do it alone. Again, the darkest day theoretically would have caused a bit of turmoil regarding the climate as well, but that is neither here nor there currently. The important point is that Alola had seen the error of their ways. They had worked towards a better region that was more in tune with nature, a community better interwoven with each other, led by trial captains and kahunas that would serve the Tapus. But what if they hadn't done so? Well, that's how we find ourselves within Ultra Ruin, a place where the air quality is so bad that a special suit is recommended if you intend to stay for long periods of time. The Ultra Ruin has been long proven by the community to be Hau'oli City, whether it be through what remains within the ruins or through reading the welcoming sign of the city. Even the music itself is a corrupted and distorted version of Hau'oli's main tracks, and it's creepy and heartbreaking. Now, there are a number of different interesting details regarding Ultra Ruin, and I have to separate the information that they give us from the games and the anime. Both, though, are actually incredibly important to fully piece together what we have here and get a few confirmations. For starters, within the games, Pikachu, Execute, and Cubone will not evolve into their Alolan forms if they are evolved within these ruins. This is because the natural power of Alola is gone, that being Necrozma's light. Pikachu is stated to have many factors involved that influence its evolution into Alolan Raichu, not just its diet as it is often claimed in the games. There are additional claims that do state that it is more than a diet within the games as well, though their new evolution may be the result of simply living near the beaches of Alola, as we can also see Alolan Raichu within Pokemon Snap. But we don't see our other two Alolan forms. In fact, Marowak is stated to be an evolution that was caused by external pressures, which would be the sheer amount of grass Pokemon and being surrounded by water. This is why it evolves into a fire type whose flames cannot be extinguished by water. Furthermore, since it could not have evolved without being protected by other Pokemon, they value their friendships and connections more, going as far as dancing in honor of their fallen friends and family and protecting the people that they love. But the most interesting of them all is Alolan Executor. You may find them in Blueberry Academy, but you can't evolve Execute into one there. We do not find them on the same beaches as Alolan Raichu within Snap, and the people of Alola claim that it is the son of Alola that gives these Pokemon their full form as they rightly deserve and are proud of. And they aren't wrong, because it's all too convenient that a Pokemon would become a dragon type thanks to the light in a region provided by a massive dragon of light. Of course, then, I am talking about Necrozma. But now in the Ultra Ruin, these forms are not possible. Not only this, but the man lets us know of many additional details, nicely stated as Bulbapedia puts it once more. The suited man will also provide the player with tidbits of information on some of the debris and items that could be interacted with, such as a working filtering machine to make dirty water safe for drinking, an electronic Hyrule City beachfront display, which then appears to be the only remnant of the color blue in this world. There are relocation notice cards, which served as virtual storage devices, back when machines that could read them existed, posters for a power plant, others from its kind having been burned for fuel by people from 2 generations ago, and the rusted sign said to have been from a long-lost era. According to the man, older people did not like hearing about this power plant, being the people from 2 generations ago most likely, although he does not know why. The story can be pieced together to tell us that a power plant was eventually established in Alola. Maybe this power plant was in Alola long ago, but completely removed at one point. Maybe it was denied construction even. But in this universe, the plant was established. Alola was further polluted, and eventually the island was deemed unsafe to live on as the power plants polluted the land, water, and skies, removing all the blue that once existed and causing the requirements for that water filtration. Then, Guzzlord arrived, an ultra beast that is much like our own Pokemon designed to clean up the messes of humanity. Though, when everything is polluted, then it means that all should be cleansed. And the only way to be sure all the pollutants don't become anything new is to consume them in their entirety. Guzzlord does not release waste. It can consume rivers and mountains, drawing them in through some sort of ability it has, and it only continues in its hunger. And without the light of Alola, without the Tapus and the power of nature, Guzzlord would run rampant freely without any way to cull its destructive habits. This is further emphasized within the anime in one important detail, being the appearance of Tapu Koko. Only within the anime do we have a scene of Ultra Ruin's version of Tapu Koko, colors dulled in this desolate landscape. It uses its power paired with the Koko of Ash's universe and teleports him and Pikachu into the Ultra Ruin. It is here that it's explained that the light is gone and the Z-moves are effectively gone as well. Nature has been long destroyed and they blame Guzzlord, though once again, at least within the games, we know Guzzlord is not what caused the downfall of Alola, so we have differing information. But at least by seeing just a little bit more of this story, of this universe, we can piece together why Guzzlord couldn't be pushed out and what happened to the Tapus. They simply didn't have enough power to fight the Ultra Beast, all because they derive their power from nature itself, which has been destroyed by humanity. Now, what's even more interesting back in our world is that Zygarde came to Alola and absorbed its power, as we are shown within ZA, or told within ZA. But even if we look back at the Alola region, Zygarde cubes can be found within the Kahuna's homes, tying not just Zygarde to Necrozma as ZA has, but also to the Tapus directly, as all of them receive power from nature itself. But there's one other interesting quartet in the world of Pokemon that are incredibly similar to the Tapus, a parallel to them if you would, yet are fully corrupted creatures of mankind's folly. These Pokemon drain life from nature and cause calamity, and these Pokemon are the Ruin Quartet. I originally didn't even have the Ruin Quartet as part of my outline for this, but while digging through all of this, Bulbapedia drew my attention to a couple of different coincidences that make them parallel the Tapus. Both quartets share a base stat total of 570. Each quartet has a shared type. The Guardian Deities share the Fairy type, while the Treasures of Ruin share the Dark type. The respective quartets' signature moves, Nature's Madness and Ruination, are differently typed variations of each other and Super Fang, all of them being moves that deal damage equivalent to half of the target's remaining HP. Both quartets also share variations of given abilities. The Guardian Deities all share abilities that summon a different type of terrain upon entering battle, while the Treasures of Ruin all have variations of abilities that lower a stat of all other Pokemon on the field when they are present. Now, this is not me saying that the Tapus became the Ruin Quartet, but instead to show us what can be brought into existence through the terror and folly of mankind, of mankind's mistreatment of nature and Pokemon. Each of these Treasures of Ruin being Pokemon that are not the entire body, but are the beads, tablets, swords, and bowl, with each of these pieces actually having a real-life version and story that I will save for another day. But I'll at least let you know that the Earth Moose Ting Lu has a real-life sacrificial bowl on its head. and the tablets of Wo-Chen are from a land in which the records that detailed a ruler's misdeeds were all being destroyed, though it is suspected that the two real-life individuals were able to work together in secret and create many tablets that would be preserved in time to tell this story. I've talked about this in my legendary Pokemon family tree video, but there's a lot more that I've learned since then, and I've been really thinking about making an entire video focused on this quartet. Though now in their creation, these four bring, as their name suggests, ruin, whether it be through avalanches, creation of magma, earthquakes, or the withering of plant life. These four are a danger to all that lives, and so it makes sense that they would be locked away for the safety of all. But what's most interesting is that they are not originally from Paldea. They were brought there, and somewhere in time, they were either awakened by horrible people on purpose or by accident. I do question if these items did not take on these forms until after their introduction to Paldea though. That maybe they were just the items until they were introduced to Paldea's kingdom. Then they became the quartet we know and wonder about today, but that's of course a theory of its own. Let's move on to our final topic, the question of why would we want to bring humans back to the lands that they destroyed? Wouldn't they just destroy it again? Why aren't the Pokemon afraid and instead encouraging their return? It's because of two major reasons that are strongly established within Pokemon's world. One is that it is actually Arceus' wish that people in Pokemon are united as one, that they walk hand in hand in harmony. This is shown once again through the old verses of Hisui, and this is why Arceus rained down 10 bolts of lightning and created 10 noble Pokemon. Pokemon that would, as we discussed, serve alongside the heroes of Hisui to protect the people that are settled there. The other reason is because of what happened within Alola, or many other games for that matter. In many situations, whether it be defeating Cyrus at Mount Coronet, taking down Eternamax in Galar, Mega Evolving Rayquaza to destroy the Delta Meteor, or stopping Kyogre and Groudon, or Mega Evolving Zygarde to defeat Anj, they all hold one important factor. The bond between humanity and Pokemon are strong enough to overcome anything, any calamity, any destructive force, any scenario that would dare to threaten the world of life and death, nature, peace, and all through the will of Arceus. It is through these positive bonds that a Pokemon's true potential is unleashed, their greatest powers, the pinnacle of their strength. It's why Battle Bond Greninja was brought into existence. It's how Mega Evolution can be performed without hurting Pokemon, and so much more. You can even use Colress as an example, as he, at least within the anime, was looking to use the rage of Pokemon for power, but eventually learns, at least within the games, that it is the positive bonds that might actually be stronger, and that's why he appears in Alola. And so the Pokemon of Pokopia want to bring the good people of Kanto back to the region. They need to, because eventually there will be a great threat to all Pokemon, and the only way to save their lives is not through humanity or Pokemon acting as separate entities, but rather to come together and act as one cohesive unit. After all, even within Galar, we get to see humanity try to fix what they have done wrong. While the entirety of the region is a harsh climate that only the strongest and most vicious survive in, it is a land that is trying to improve. They use many different forms of energy, not just the Dynamax power, but also hydroelectric, steam energy, and more. They are looking towards the future as they help the Pokemon that live there. Even if Chairman Rose may have made a great mistake, thinking himself the hero, especially evidenced by his music, which is Latin, and when you translate it back, it basically says that Rose will be the hero, he charges head on to solve the energy crisis in his own way. Again, big mistake to just revive Eternatus into Eternamax without any help whatsoever. And while the games do a poor job of showing what could have been, the manga helps show us what plot we could have had within the games, which would have changed the perspective of the games overall and the effect that they're trying to work towards. According to the simulations, it's estimated that 20 to 30 years from now, Galarian society will collapse. And a few hundred years further, humans and Pokemon will be destroyed. The destruction of Galar wouldn't start in 1,000 years. It would already be over. And this is how Pokopia is evolving. This is what's happening to Pokopia. If they don't come back, the entirety of the region could be destroyed. Now, you may wonder why Rose would lie, just as a side note, but it's also because he's a bit of an egotistical individual working to make the royalty of Galar into the heroes. He's also a bit of a liar and inconsistent with how he talks to people, trying to make everyone worried in different ways, rather than just flat out stating this information, this tragedy that is set to occur. But if this information from the manga gets canonized within the games, it would even explain why in Legends ZA, former champion Leon paid a visit to Lumiose. They may have been discussing solutions to a future energy crisis, containment zones, and after the events of the game, even how Rogue Mega Pokemon and the Rogue Dynamax Pokemon mirror each other. But I digress. I don't really know if Pokopia will have some sort of crazy boss at the end of it, but it would be interesting to put all those abilities that Ditto gains to some sort of use in a big climax, though I don't want a big battle. Rather, I want a crowning achievement that brings us to the moment in which Ditto is reunited with its trainer, a moment that would mark the beginning of Pokemon and humanity uniting once more and avoiding the deconstruction of an entire region. What are your thoughts and hopes for Pokopia? It's not typically the kind of game that I would honestly play, but I'll have some fun playing it on stream here on YouTube when it comes out, so I can at least find out the lore of it and see just how close I am to the answers that I've proposed today. And if you made it this far, do make sure that you do subscribe. Maybe check out some of my other videos, as I, again, release deep dives into Pokemon weekly, and share the channel around. I would love to continue growing as I work alone, and can use all the support you can give. I'm also looking to try and improve the lighting in here, which is why it's different in this video compared to other ones, so the support goes a long ways. And if you'd like to go the extra mile, you can become a member for as little as $3 a month, getting you perks like early videos, behind the scenes info, and your name shouted out in the credits of the video, which we're gonna go do right now. Thank you to all of our members of the channel, starting with the Gods of Hope, Krill, Final Fantasy 14, Heals for Life, Biggins, and Batty, Nit, Buzz, and Summer, then the Champions, Neoskosa, and Joshua Biggins, Bill Wilson, then the Knights of the Court, Crumbo, Nature 9000, Batty, Lemon, Jalon Dean, Zoomster, Kelsey, Hoover, Covers, Vio, Shiny Gems, Vix, My Nitrogen, Krill, Final Fantasy 14, Wow, Heals for Life, and Blue Dalek. Then finally, all of the Wanderers of the channel, beginning with Adrian Lopez, Nail in the Fashion, Habits, as they put in the little parentheses, whatever. Why? But who the heck is Why? What happened there? What? It's just Why. Their name is just Why, and I had to stop to actually look through the records, and their name is just Why. That threw me off. Buddy Richardson, WTF DCLXVI, Frank Dog, Lady Lex 7X, Mark Rivera, Shoot Pass Limit, Michael Payment, Cole, Mr. Diagonal, Yips, Domo Evergato, Lizard, Lydia Marie, Eric Rips, Zane Edom, Beware, High Five Flexington, Space Elozzi, Reese Maru, Sheep, Alan Aguilar, Can 1, Zach Lane, Pokemon, 89 Favorite Fantasia, Solus Swolus, Lotus Marie, Chase Faster, The Lunnock, Darkrai Drive, Minecraft, Pipioli, Tama, I'm the freaking alien of the cucumber, Jeremy Ruiz, Ezra Apollo, Jers, Izzy, Jerry Rivera, Lucky Charms, Brock Baker, SD, Mira, Marcus Hall, Anonymous, Josh Stapler, Mr. Raven, Ravi Ramsey, Zach Hempstead, Nick, Zippin Pigeon, 80, Mads, Kageo Tsuzuki, Suro Diotavio, False Error Code, Sa and Moon, Carby, Zek62, Teabag is phasing Guya, Harrison James, Jolteon, Lisette O, Kabutalk 123, Invert Fossils, Brock Schaefer, Agro Blaze, Pyking 221, Luis Wesley, Guerrero, I Wish I Was Drunk, J. Swan, FUT, Hoop, I'm not ready for all of these names today, apparently. Max Supreme, Zora, J. Gill, Ronji, the Iwatomi Hospic, Galcal, Joey L. Schmidt, Chief Snoop, Soul, Anime and Vibes, Whacker, Night Owl, 707, Tarzan, 2319, The Sporty Yamper, Hag, Travis Lamb, Lumina, Evan, BSL Bay, Michael Stein, Jacob Square, Sanzone, Goku, The Lost Mysteria, Sakai, Gaming Roots, Evil Chan, Michael 626 Gaming, Nicole Manassi, Nest Sandwich, Boss Emmy, whatever this is, Lord Figment, Medical TA73, Sydney House, Dakota Couch, Brad 24, Sunny D, Drixo, Carl Jean, Hunter Ow, Saint Kasam, Rebecca Conahune, Jabby W, Memento Mortem, Marshy, Edward Kosowski, Fedeka Fox, Eric Cadabro, King Pie, Jack Frost, Richie Sanavi, Addy C, DJ Monk 23, Squidwater, Rice Smith, Just JM, MD, Horsewater Cocktail, Muse, Artworld, Talumio, Easy Under 772, Andrew Foss, Pick Anonymous, Summer Sloth, Ian Ray, Big N C Knight, Corner of the Cobbin, Sleepy Bear, Jericho, Unseelie King, The Morning Guys, Garrett Hoffman, Dylan Peters, Malachi Barker, and Heather Wesley. Thank you all for being members of the channel. It goes a huge mile. I'm finally getting a new chair that's probably not going to hurt my butt or back. I should be ordering it, and it's not without people like you guys who help support the channel in extra ways. Otherwise, I'd be probably messing up my back, and I'd feel like 70 when I already feel like 40. Anywho, thank you so much for watching. And as always, don't think I want to do, don't think I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time.